These 8 exercises destroy your shoulders and joints after 40 years old. Did you know that the complexity of our shoulder joints becomes more vulnerable as we age? That's right. Our tendons lose elasticity, ligaments become less resistant, and as if that wasn't enough, recovery capacity decreases. The numbers don't lie. According to orthopedists, more than 28% of men over 40 who weight train suffer shoulder injuries. It's an alarming number. And the worst part, many of these injuries are caused by exercises these men have been doing for years, without realizing they're silently deteriorating their joints. That's why today you'll see the 8 exercises that most often send men over 40 to the surgery room. These are exercises that not only have greater injury potential for mature shoulders, but also offer a greater margin of error in execution, multiplying the risks. And let's be honest, how many gyms really offer adequate supervision for each student? Before we begin, tell me in the comments your name and how long you've been training. Exercise number 1, dumbbell fly. The dumbbell fly is a classic chest development exercise that many men include in their training routine for decades. Originally created to mimic a hugging movement, it promises that definition in the central line of the chest that everyone seeks. The problem with this exercise lies in the biomechanics. The extreme lateral opening of the arms places the shoulder in maximum horizontal abduction, an extremely vulnerable position. In the lowest position of the movement, the anterior ligaments of the shoulder are at maximum tension, while the rotator cuff works intensely to stabilize the joint. What happens after 40 is that this repeated combination creates the perfect scenario for injuries. The tendons of the rotator cuff, especially the supraspinatus, no longer have the same elasticity and recovery capacity they had at 25. The repetition of this joint stress week after week leads to micro-injuries that silently accumulate. A frequently ignored factor is that the fixed trajectory of the dumbbells may not be ideal for each individual's anatomy. We all have small differences in the bone structure of our shoulders, and the fly forces everyone to follow the same movement pattern, ignoring these differences. Additionally, the lack of stability in this exercise causes many men to compensate with other muscles or alter the trajectory of the movement when fatigue appears, further increasing the risk of injury. The safer alternative for those over 40 is to replace the dumbbell fly with the machine fly. The machine offers a more controlled trajectory and allows individual adjustments for your specific anatomy. The critical point is to position the bench and the weight so that the movement doesn't force the joint beyond its natural range. Another important modification is to never lower your arms below the line of your body, limiting the range to protect the anterior region of the shoulder. Your chest will still receive enough stimulus for development, but with much less risk to your joints. Exercise number 2, front raise. The front raise is one of the most common movements in gyms to work the anterior deltoid. It seems simple and harmless, raising the arms in front of the body to shoulder height. However, this exercise hides significant risks, especially for those over 40. The main problem lies in the compression mechanism that occurs during the movement. The front raise compresses the supraspinatus tendon against the acromion, causing what doctors call impingement syndrome. With advancing age, the subacromial space naturally decreases, and this repetitive movement accelerates tendon wear. The danger is in the cumulative damage that often doesn't present immediate symptoms, but manifests as acute pain years later when the damage is already established. It's like a car that makes a strange noise only when the problem has already become serious. Additionally, the exercise overloads the acromioclavicular joint, especially when performed with heavier weights, potentially causing early arthritis in this region. And frankly, most men use excessive loads in this movement, prioritizing ego instead of technique. What many people don't know is that this exercise is practically unnecessary if you already do shoulder presses. The overhead press already activates the anterior deltoid very well. In fact, this muscle is also intensely recruited as an assistant in almost all chest exercises, from the bench press to push-ups. If you really want to work the anterior deltoid more safely, opt for dumbbell presses on a slightly inclined bench. This variation better distributes the load among the 3 deltoid heads while significantly reducing compression of the supraspinatus tendon. Remember that the goal is not just to build muscles, but to keep them functional for as long as possible. Exercises that cause premature joint wear are a terrible long-term investment. Exercise number 3, behind the neck press. The behind the neck press was once considered a fundamental exercise for building wide, imposing shoulders. Popularized by classic bodybuilders from the 70s and 80s, it's still practiced by many men seeking that cannonball shoulder look. However, this exercise represents one of the greatest risks to shoulder health, especially after 40. The shoulder is forced into extreme external rotation with abduction, causing immense stress on the anterior capsule and glenohumeral ligaments. This unnatural position places delicate structures under maximum tension. The big problem is that this position drastically increases the risk of joint instability and impingement syndrome. The supraspinatus tendon, part of the rotator cuff, is compressed between the humerus and the acromion, like a sandwich being pressed. This problem significantly worsens after 40 when this space is already naturally reduced by degenerative changes. Over time, this repeated compression can lead to tendinitis, bursitis, and even partial or complete rotator cuff tears. Studies show that more than 30% of regular practitioners of this exercise after 40 develop some type of shoulder pathology within a 3-year period. For many men, shoulder joint mobility is already compromised by years of poor posture, excessive computer use, and repetitive activities. Adding an exercise that forces the shoulder into an extreme position is like throwing gasoline on an already burning fire. The safer alternative is to replace it with the front shoulder press. This variation allows you to work the deltoid efficiently without putting the shoulder in a risky position. The movement should be controlled, with the elbows slightly in front of the body and never completely locking the arms at the top of the movement. For those seeking greater activation of the posterior deltoid, exercises such as the wide grip upright row or lateral raise with a slight forward inclination are much safer and equally effective options. Exercise number 4, pec deck. The pec deck is that machine where you sit with your arms open and close the movement using your elbows. Don't confuse it with the chest fly machine where we close with our hands. Although it seems safe because it's a guided machine, this exercise hides dangerous traps for the shoulders of men over 40. The main problem is in the arm fixation mechanism. When you position your forearms on the pads and start the movement, your shoulders are forced into a position of internal rotation combined with horizontal abduction. This position puts extraordinary tension on the anterior ligaments of the shoulder, precisely those that tend to become more vulnerable with age. After 40, joint stiffness increases, and the shoulder capsule loses elasticity. The pec deck forces this joint into a movement it naturally resists, especially at the point of greatest opening. It's like repeatedly bending a paper clip until it breaks. Another aggravating factor is that the machine imposes a fixed trajectory that doesn't adapt to individual anatomical differences. All practitioners, regardless of arm size or shoulder structure, are forced to follow the same arc of movement. This completely ignores the fact that each person has an optimal and safe angle for this type of movement. Many men also make the mistake of using excessive loads, mainly because the machine creates a false sense of security. The heavier the weight, the greater the compression on the shoulder structures, exponentially increasing the risk of injury. A much safer alternative is the cable fly. This exercise allows a more natural trajectory, respecting the anatomical particularities of each person. Additionally, the continuous resistance of the cable efficiently activates the chest fibers without the critical point of maximum tension in the shoulder that occurs in the pec deck. If you still want to use a similar machine, opt for more modern models that allow you to adjust the starting point of the movement, limiting the range to avoid the position of greatest vulnerability for the shoulder. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Having constant access to science-based information is what will make you progress with health in the long term in the world of weight training. Exercise number 5, upright row. The upright row is frequently praised for its ability to develop the deltoids, especially the lateral portion and the upper trapezius. However, this classic exercise hides one of the most harmful mechanisms for shoulder health after 40. The movement forces the shoulders into anterior flexion with internal rotation, creating what specialists call a painful arc. During execution, the head of the humerus is compressed against the acromion, creating significant subacromial impingement. Between these bones are the subacromial bursa and the supraspinatus tendon, which after 40 are more worn and less elastic. This repeated compression is the fastest way to develop bursitis or supraspinatus tendinitis. The numbers are alarming. Studies show that more than 45% of regular upright row practitioners over 45 exhibit some degree of rotator cuff degeneration, compared to only 15% in control groups that don't perform this exercise. The problem worsens because many men gradually increase the load over the years. but the tendons and ligaments don't keep up with this progression at the same speed. While the muscle adapts quickly to the stimulus, the support structures take much longer, creating a structural imbalance. Additionally, the final position of the movement places the elbow above the shoulder line, which by itself is already considered a risk zone for subacromial impingement, even without additional load. Add to that the weight of the bar or dumbbells, and you have the perfect recipe for joint problems. The beauty of weight training is in the existence of safer alternatives for almost any exercise. In the case of the upright row, you can replace it with lateral raises and shrugs separately. This way, you work the same muscles but avoid the risk position that happens when these movements are combined. For the trapezius, shoulder shrugs with dumbbells or on the machine are extremely effective. For the lateral deltoid, lateral raises with light dumbbells and high repetition provide excellent stimulus with minimal joint risk. The secret is to keep the elbows slightly flexed and never raise the arms above the shoulder line. Exercise number 6, pullover. The pullover is a classic exercise that promises to develop both the chest and the back in a single movement. Its origin dates back to the early days of bodybuilding when it was believed that it could even expand the rib cage. Despite the nostalgic appeal, this exercise represents a significant risk for mature shoulders. The extended arms above the head place the shoulder in extreme flexion, forcing the head of the humerus against the posterior joint capsule. This capsule, which already becomes more rigid with age, is subjected to pressure for which it was not designed, especially when we use significant loads. This extreme range causes micro-lesions in the capsule and excessive stress on the glenohumeral ligaments. Over time, these small injuries can evolve into posterior shoulder instability, an extremely limiting condition for any weight training practitioner. The movement also overloads the acromioclavicular joint in a position for which it was not designed to support load. This joint, which connects the clavicle to the acromion of the scapula, is particularly vulnerable in men over 40 who already show some degree of natural wear. A common mistake is thinking that because it's a broad movement that stretches well, the pullover is beneficial for mobility. In fact, repeatedly forcing a joint beyond its functional range with additional load is counterproductive for long-term joint health. For those looking to work the latissimus dorsi, alternatives such as the neutral grip pull-down or the bent-over row are much safer and more efficient. These options allow similar recruitment of the latissimus dorsi without placing the shoulder in a position of extreme risk. For the chest, especially the lower portion, the incline cable fly offers excellent stimulus without the risk associated with the pullover. The key is to find exercises that respect the natural and safe range of your joints, especially after 40 when recovery is slower and the support structures are naturally more fragile. Exercise number 7, behind the neck pull-down. The behind the neck pull-down is simply one of the worst possible exercises in the gym in terms of injury. This movement, which was extremely popular in past decades, continues to be practiced by many men who don't understand the devastating mechanism it imposes on the shoulders. The fundamental problem is in the unnatural position that the shoulder is forced to assume. When you pull the bar behind your head, your shoulders are forced to perform an extreme external rotation combined with abduction, placing maximum tension on the anterior ligaments and joint capsule. This position seriously compromises the subacromial space, compressing the supraspinatus tendon and the bursa against bony structures. For men over 40, whose tendons have already lost natural elasticity, this repeated compression is the fastest way to develop tendinitis or even rotator cuff tears. Besides the obvious risks to the shoulder, this exercise also places the cervical spine in a position of forced flexion to allow the bar to pass behind the head. This position compromises the natural stability of the spine and can contribute to premature wear of the cervical vertebrae. What few discuss is the inefficiency of this exercise compared to safer alternatives. Electromyographic studies demonstrate that the behind-the-neck pull-down is significantly less effective in activating the back compared to the front pull-down, the supinated pull-down, or the V-bar pull-down. You are literally taking a much greater risk to obtain inferior results. It's like driving against traffic to reach a destination you could reach more quickly by the correct route. The obvious and superior alternative is the front pull-down. This movement allows more efficient activation of the latissimus dorsi, places the shoulder in a much more favorable mechanical position, and drastically reduces the risk of injury. Additionally, it allows a much safer long-term load progression. If you're looking for greater activation of the upper portion of the back, the supinated grip pull-down is an excellent alternative that more intensely recruits the teres major and the rhomboid, without the risk associated with the behind-the-neck pull-down. Exercise number 8. Dips. Dips are frequently praised as one of the best exercises for developing the triceps and the lower portion of the chest. Although it's extremely effective for those with healthy and stable shoulders, it represents a substantial risk for men over 40. In the lowest position of the movement, the shoulders are forced into hyperextension with internal rotation, pushing the head of the humerus forward and creating enormous tension on the anterior capsule and the glenoid labrum. This is precisely the position that orthopedists most fear for mature shoulders. The repetition of this movement pattern causes micro-injuries that, over time, evolve into shoulder instability or labrum injuries. It's no coincidence that many men report shoulder pain after years of practicing dips, especially when they start using additional weight. The rotator cuff also suffers disproportionate load to stabilize the joint during the movement. After 40, this muscle group no longer has the same recovery capacity, and repetitive stress can lead to progressive degeneration of the tendons. A frequently ignored factor is the impact of excessive range. Many practitioners seek to descend as much as possible to feel greater stretch, without realizing they're forcing the shoulder joint beyond its safe functional range, especially with body weight as resistance. The safer alternative to work the same muscle groups is the triceps pushdown. This exercise allows you to efficiently isolate the triceps without placing the shoulder in a vulnerable position. For the lower chest, the incline cable fly offers excellent activation with minimal joint risk. If you still wish to include some form of dip in your training, consider the assisted dip machine, which allows you to precisely control the load and limit the range of motion to avoid the position of greatest risk for the shoulder. Start with significant assistance and progress gradually, always respecting the zero pain limit. If you liked this, and also want to discover 4 dangerous exercises for those over 50, and how to substitute them more safely, we've left a video appearing right now on the screen showing each of them better. Don't miss it. Thank you for watching this far, and may God bless you, my friend.